Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out top 10 most important moments in British history.
Are you ready for a history lesson?
Yeah.
Welcome to Watch Mojo UK, and today we're
History.
counting down our picks for the top 10 most important events in British history. Before we begin, if you enjoy this video, please subscribe for more great content. For this list, we're looking at some of the key moments that have propelled Britain forward in the last 1,000 years. Obviously, we can't cram a millennium's worth of history into one video, so don't be surprised if there are some significant events we haven't covered just yet.
What could possibly be the top 10? There's so many big moments in world history that come from the British Empire. I have no idea what to expect.
Number 10, the failure of the Commonwealth. The Protectorate was a period that took place during the Commonwealth when England, Ireland and Scotland were under the rule of Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell and subsequently his son Richard Cromwell. This was the only time in history that England had republican rule. Monarchists referred to this period as the interregnum, a time when there was no ruler on the throne of England. This resulted in the Restoration, which took place the following year. The demise of the republican rule still allowed many of the recently established democratic institutions to remain, which have endured until modern times.
Okay, I've never heard of this, I don't think. I've heard of Oliver Cromwell. His official title was Lord Protector. So the Commonwealth started after the end of the Second English Civil War and the trial and execution of Charles I. So the biggest moment they're talking about is when that failed. Oh, when Oliver Cromwell died in 1658, his son Richard Cromwell inherited the title Lord Protector. So Richard Cromwell couldn't hold it together, and a year later they reinstalled the monarchy. But I guess in the video it said a lot of the organizations that came from the Commonwealth are still around, so maybe it was a good thing. Maybe. I don't know.
Number 9, American colonies declare their independence. Prior to 1776, what we now know as the United States of America was simply a collection of 13 colonies on the east coast bordering the Atlantic. Residents there were becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the British rule and had been waging war on the Brits for more than a year. Finally, by the summer of 1776, all 13 of the colonies had agreed to segregate from England. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, which was then adopted by Congress. The American War of Independence was not yet finished. It would go on for another 5 years.
It's really interesting to me that this narrator, who sounds British, calls it the American War for Independence, but in America we call it the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War. So our Revolutionary War is just number 9. It's number 9 on the list. A cute little number 9. There are 8 more important moments in British history. Funny.
Number 8, the Great Fire of London. In the summer of 1666, a blaze engulfed the city of London, destroying almost everything in its path. 13,200 houses were taken, as well as 87 churches. It's estimated that the vast majority of London residents lost their homes to the fire.
The majority?
Strangely, amid all this destruction, there were hardly any reports of deaths taking place due to the fire. Historians have established several reasons for this. Firstly, the deaths of commoners were not always recorded, and secondly, the bodies may have been completely incinerated, leaving no evidence of how many really perished. The city had to be entirely rebuilt, and some historians believe the fire was actually beneficial in a way because it eliminated many unsanitary and plague-infected buildings.
So this fire just cleared all the crap out. That would be good. What a refreshing rehash of London. I would like to see a map of where it was. So it looks like it was right next to the Tower of London. The tower survived. So this area doesn't seem that large, but relative to the size of London, but I guess at the time it really was. Oh, this has the time. It lasted from a Sunday to a Wednesday? The flames were helped by the mayor, Lord Bloodworthy, who refused permission to pull down the neighboring houses, thus creating a fire break. He did not want to be responsible for paying for the damage. The fire was able to take hold whilst he neglected his duty, even used a very rude expression to describe how small he thought the fire was. What is that? What rude expression? Mayor Lord Bloodworthy. What a name for being responsible for the death And what a year, 1666. It's like the devil. Oh, his rude expression was, "A woman might piss it out." He was widely blamed for the failure to stop the fire. However, he appears to have been made a scapegoat. He needed the king's authority to pull down those houses, but the king wouldn't give it to him.
Number 7. The Peasants Revolt. In the 14th century, British commoners had a lot to be upset about. The plague had recently wiped out a huge portion of the population, which meant that labourers were able to demand more money because workers were no longer so readily available.
Oh.
The government, however, set the Ordinance of Labourers, which cemented wages at the low amounts they were before the Black Death. They also levied a poll tax to fund the war against the French, which ate up even more of the peasants' wages. All of this led to the Great Rising of 1381, which had an impact on the 100 Years' War because authorities were not able to raise taxes for funding as they had for prior conflicts.
Well, that's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so the peasants revolted because there was a plague which killed a lot of the labor force. So then the labor force wages went up because of demand, but then the people in power reduced those wages and made they pushed the wages back to the way they were before the plague, and they raised taxes. What do you expect? The peasants are going to revolt. They had every right. It sounds like times were pretty rough, so I don't blame them.
Number 6. The Suffragette Movement is formed. Though the women's suffrage movement had been underway for several years already, 1903 marked an important event in British history. The Women's Social and Political Union was created by Emmeline Pankhurst and others, which took direct action to further their goals. The First World War put a pause on suffrage campaigning, though there was still some progress. Many cite 1918 as the year that women in the UK gained the right to vote, but in fact, at that point it excluded women under the age of 30, as well as those who didn't independently own property. It was only a decade later in 1928 that all women were granted the right to cast a vote.
So it started in 1903, and they didn't actually get the vote until 1928. It took 25 years. There was a world war in the middle of that, I guess, which would delay things. That's not even 100 years ago. That's crazy to think about, isn't it? Women couldn't vote 100 years ago. So in America, women got the vote in 1920, but it was just white women. So.
Number 5. The End of World War II. The entire period of the Second World War, ranging from 1939 to 1945, was evidently a remarkable time in the history of the United Kingdom. Of the many things that came of the war, one of the most notable was a push for a bigger and more intervening government. The welfare of people during wartime had become a government problem that was dealt with to the satisfaction of the population. A spirit of community-mindedness was also fostered by the difficult times of war, and the British people came out of the conflict with strengthened class relationships, which would lead to more left-leaning social policies moving forward.
I can't imagine living somewhere that was being bombed by Nazis, and then it's over? That feeling of relief and oh my God. Huge. I know in the US, the end of World War II affected a lot of things. There was a baby boom. People started buying houses. It changed the economy. It changed the lifestyle. It changed everything about living in the United States. I'm sure it did the same in Britain. The war is a horrible thing, but I do think something great that came out of it was the sense of community that he's talking about. That's beautiful. Humanity.
Number 4. Henry VIII severs ties with the church.
Right.
Henry VIII is probably most famous for his 6 wives, 2 of whom he had beheaded, and it was his desire to end his marriage with his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, that spurred on one of the key events in British history. Catherine was unable to give Henry the male heir he so needed, so he petitioned Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage. When he was refused, he took the radical step of severing ties with Rome and started the English Reformation. He named himself Supreme Head of the Church of England and was excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church, though he always remained true to his Catholic upbringing.
That is huge. I know back then the Catholic Church controlled so much of everyday life. For him to say, no more, we're doing our own thing, just so he could get a divorce. I mean, it seems self-serving. It was self-serving, but at the same time, it changed British history, of course, but it changed the world as far as Western civilization goes. This is a good choice for what number are we on? I don't even know. This could be number one. What could be more important than this? I don't know.
Number 3, the Magna Carta was signed.
Oh, yeah.
The Magna Carta, which can be translated to the Great Charter, is one of history's most revered and renowned documents. It was instituted by King John of England, and the premise behind it was to ensure that every citizen, including the monarchy, would be subject to the law of the land.
That's huge.
Much of the text has been edited since its inception, and very few of the clauses remain in modern law. But nonetheless, the Magna Carta is the basis of the British Constitution. Many principles represented in the document have been influential in bills of rights around the world.
Yeah, fun fact. Someone told me that the Magna Carta was never signed because the king didn't know how to write. It was sealed. He put his seal on it. He didn't sign it.
Number 2, the Battle of Waterloo.
Really?
On June 18th, 1815, Napoleon and his army marched to the Belgian village of Waterloo to fight against the Duke of Wellington and his army of Brits, Germans, and Belgians. Napoleon made some critical strategic errors which led to his troops losing the battle. This victory for England marked the end of France's dominance in Europe and a return to the previous power Britain had exerted for centuries. The result of this conflict is thought to have an impact on world history as well, bringing in a period of relative peace which allowed for technical innovations and prosperity.
Yeah, I've reacted to a couple videos that are about Napoleon, and something I learned is that British folks do not like Napoleon. And I guess, they fought for a long time. Napoleon really put a wrench in the spokes of European life, sounds like. And the British finally took him out. That would be huge. What's bigger than this? What could be number one? Maybe the Beatles getting together? I don't know.
Number 1, the Battle of Hastings.
Oh.
Nearly 1,000 years
yeah.
ago, the face of England was forever changed. In a battle won by William the Conqueror, the Anglo-Saxon King Harold was killed with an arrow through the eye. The outcome of the Battle of Hastings impacted British life, culture, and language in innumerable ways. The language of official documents became Latin, but of even more impact was the influence of the French language over English, especially in the tradition of names. Traditional Anglo-Saxon names began to disappear in favour of French names that we today consider inherently English, like William, Henry, and Robert. Do you agree with our picks?
I didn't know that. What am I looking at? So I'm sure more things came from it than French names for dudes. So basically this established the Normans as the rulers of England, and thus began or continued many years of wars with the French. I love that the American Revolution or the American War for Independence is number 8. There's so many other important things that happened throughout the centuries. Really funny. Wow, I learned something from this. This was good. Thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.